The work around urban farming, we talk about the discipline, we talk about the work ethic, and that they could take what they grow, come back and make salads and cook and just see, wow, this opened their minds. And then they seeing themselves being entrepreneurs and being able to help feed a family and to understand and to appreciate, where food comes from.
Hello and welcome to Wherever John May Roam, the National Corn Growers Association podcast. This is where leaders, growers, and stakeholders in the corn industry can turn for big picture conversations about the state of the industry and its future. I'm Dusty Weiss, and I'll be introducing your host, Association CEO Jon Doggett. You can join John every month as he travels the country on a mission to advocate for America's corn farmers. From the fields of the Corn Belt to the D.C. Beltway, we'll make sure that the growers who feed America have a say in the issues that are important to them, with key leaders who are shaping the future of ag. In this week's episode, world record holding, three-time Olympic gold medalist Jackie Joyner-Kersee joins us to talk about her efforts to teach urban farming to kids in East St. Louis. She shares the lessons they've learned, tells some tales from her time as the world's top female athlete, and stakes out some common ground between urban and rural America in a time when that's sorely needed. If you haven't yet, make sure that you're subscribed to this podcast in your favorite app. That way you can take us with you in your truck, your tractor, or on your next trip and never miss an update from John. Also, make sure you follow the NCGA on Twitter at National Corn and sign up for the National Corn Growers Association email newsletter at ncga.com. And with that, it's time to once again introduce Jon Doggett, the CEO of the National Corn Growers Association. John, not only does this episode bring a whole lot of star power to the table, but it touches on one of these big picture, timely issues that we face as a nation right now.
Certainly does, Dusty. And in recent years, there's been a lot of attention paid to the so-called urban-rural divide. It's been something that we've discussed in our organization, in our industry. The nation's discussed it, and particularly in the last few months. But is there really this divide, and where are the places where we can bridge that divide where it exists? So today we're going to talk with someone who has taken her incredible achievements as an athlete and used them to give back to her community in East St. Louis, Illinois. She's a three-time Olympic gold medalist in the heptathlon and the long jump. She was named as one of the all-time greatest athletes by Sports Illustrated, and that's Jackie Joyner-Kersee. And today, the Jackie Joyner-Kersee Center promotes food and nutrition security by teaching urban farming to children. Jackie, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It is truly an honor to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Be able to talk with you today.
So, we have a lot to discuss, but recent months and recent weeks have been a painful time for our country, and particularly for the African American community. And what I want to ask you first and foremost is, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, and I think it's been really strange times for the nation, as well as my community of East St. Louis dealing with COVID-19, but then also just dealing with the whole situation with George Floyd, but I think also bringing people together to really talk about some of the things that we have in common and coming together. And, people are protesting all over the nation. I know there's despair and there's anger, but when we all shed all of that, we must come together and start looking at the things that we have in common. And then what are some of the changes that we can make? So you see a young generation out there protesting and rightfully so. But I think it's also good that eventually we all come together and share our differences, agree to disagree, but in the end, to agree so our nation can be a better nation as well as our communities.
Amen. We're all Americans, and we need to get back to that sense of unity that at times in this country has been hard to achieve. But let's start at the beginning, and what I'd like to hear from you, and I know others would, is what was your experience like growing up? When I have mentioned to folks that you were going to be on the podcast, it was amazing how many people from various parts of the country and in various places in society, everybody knew about your athletic career. But what was it like growing up in East St. Louis, and what's it like for kids growing up in East St. Louis today?
Yeah, growing up in East St. Louis, my hometown had very young parents. My mother and father had my brother when they were 16 and 14. And then I'm the oldest girl, second eldest to my brother. But we had a lot of love in our home. And my mom would always tell us that you can't focus on the materialistic things, strive to work hard in life, try to achieve your goals. But then being in the community, you were surrounded by people who really would encourage you to be the best that you could be. And even though within the community, there was violence, there was drugs, but we still set goals and trying to achieve the goals that we had set for ourselves. But a community that's underserved and a community that a lot of people associate with bad, but for me, there's a lot of great people in there that's really trying to make a difference, and that stuck with me from the time I was introduced to running at the age of 9 and to understanding what it meant to volunteer, giving back, and helping others.
Ms. Joyner-Kersee, what got you interested in becoming a professional athlete? What was that spark that really drove you to go out and achieve?
The spark that got me involved in athletics was I came through a community center, and they were building this center as we were growing up, and we didn't really know what it was going to be. We thought it was going to be a skating rink. It was just really something amazing that was being built in our community. And then once we realized it was a community center, it was like, oh, the best place to go, because not only did that community center have the recreation portion of it, it also had a library where I worked with a librarian at that time, learned how to check out books. I know everybody Google everything now, but I had to learn how to do book reports. Also, the senior citizens that were over there became a part of my extended family, and that they had the different Meals on Wheels program. And then me, my sisters, my next door neighbors, we made up the cheering squad for the Midget League football team. And then I got involved in track and field. And that's when my sisters and next door neighbors let me do that on my own, because they were like, it was too much running. And what I loved about running was that it was fun. And I didn't know what I was doing. In my first competition, I finished last. But I just said if I could improve a tenth of a second if I'm running, half of an inch if I'm jumping, that meant the work that I'm doing was paying off. And that's how I set my goals. And I started with the passion of it. And then by the time I was 14, I saw the 76 Olympic Games on television. And I said, oh, I want to go to the Olympics, and that maybe one day, I could be on television.
And you certainly did that, didn't you?
I've got the list of achievements right here, John, if I can, because I think that this bears repeating. 1984, silver in the heptathlon. 1988, gold in the heptathlon, gold in the long jump, set a world record in both of those events. One of those world records still stands today. Correct me if I'm wrong about any of this, by the way, Ms. Joyner-Kersee. 1992, gold in the heptathlon, bronze in the long jump, and then in 1996, playing through an injury, a tweaked hammy, still landed a bronze in the long jump. So just an unrivaled set of accomplishments, certainly led to Sports Illustrated naming you one of the top athletes of all time. But also, John, I don't know about you, but I think this is the first time I've ever had a conversation with someone who appeared on a U.S. postage stamp.
I didn't know that. That is kind of cool.
I think it was a special edition they did during the Olympics. It was some kind of event they were doing, and it's amazing how you have a dream of just wanting to do one thing, and then how it transcends and becomes something that you didn't even envision. And so for me, the pleasure of running, the passion for running, but then also the connection, being able to work with people who saw the potential in me that I did not know I had at the time, but then also taught me a lot about giving back.
Isn't it great when you have people in your life that look at you and see things that you can do that you didn't know that you could do, and what a difference that makes?
I'm so blessed, and I'm so grateful, and it's very important for me to understand what it means to be a role model, because I realized I am a messenger. And so, and throughout my work and what I do is always about teaching others what I've been taught, and for myself, always being a great listener. And so, being able to share and encourage other and hopefully motivate them to be the best that they could be.
Well, that's such a great message, and we want to get to what you're doing in your home community in a second. But I have a particular question I have to ask because I had to look it up. The heptathlon. I kind of knew what it was, but what is the heptathlon?
You know, the heptathlon is the makeup of 7 different events, and it's contested over 2 days. And the first day you do 4 events. The first event is the 100-meter hurdles. That's where you see people jumping over, we call barriers. They jumping over barriers, and you trying to run as fast as possible while staying on your feet, because the times in the heptathlon equal up to so many points, and that's how you garner the points. And then the next event is the high jump, where you would go and you either jump off your left leg or jump off your right leg, and you go over a bar. And I always tell young kids, you land into this soft mat. And that event is the longest of the 7 events, and it's the one that you can accumulate the most points. The next event would be the shot put, and it's a 4 kilo steel ball that we put, and it's approximately right around 9 pounds. So that event takes a lot of technical work, body positioning work, and utilizing your legs. And then the last event on the first day is the 200 meters. So if you ever go out to the track, one lap around is 400 meters. Half of that is 200 meters, and you run at top speed. And usually after the first 4 events, I will ice down my physical therapist. I get a good meal, try to get a good night rest, and then I come back the next day with the long jump. And the long jump of all the 7 is my favorite one. And that's where I run down, hit the board. It's about an 8-inch board that you're trying to negotiate, size 10. Make sure you don't go over. Climb in the air, hold myself in there for at least try to say a second, and land into what I call the sandbox, but it's a sand pit. And then they measure your distance. Then the next event is the javelin. A lot of people look at it as a spear, but it's a very light implement. And again, that's where the technical and the mental controlling your lower body to allow yourself to be able to throw it as far as possible. And then the last event, the grueling event in the women's heptathlon, is the 800 meters. 2 laps. My best time in that was 2:08. So they accumulate all the times, all the points, and this is how you determine who is gold, silver, or bronze. And sometimes in the heptathlon, a lot of people think that, oh yeah, I might run the hurdles fast, might not high jump well. Well, if I don't do that, then I could find myself at a disadvantage. If you win all 7 events, which never been done, I thought I could do that, but no. Yes, clearly you could be the winner, but it takes strategy, it takes negotiation, it takes mental and physical preparation and training to make sure that you're on that roller coaster. One event doesn't go well, then you're not upset. You have to get yourself together, because the heptathlon is 7 events, not one. But we only get one medal for it.
Yeah, you have to have so many different abilities to do all of those well enough that you can succeed. That is just amazing. But Jackie, you and I met a few years ago at a Farm Foundation event in Virginia, and you were talking about some amazing work you were doing with your foundation. So can you talk about the work you're doing for kids through your foundation and where it is and who you're working with and trying to help?
Yes, so the Jackie Joyner-Kersee Center, I started my foundation work back in 1988, and it was really after my gold medal performances in Seoul, Korea, and I had come back home and wanted to inspire young people, because we always heard nothing good come from our community. And I had won the gold medals, but in the closing ceremonies, I had wrote on like a whiteboard and paper, and just let everyone know in East St. Louis that I was thinking of them and I love them. And so when I had traveled back from Seoul, Korea, taking 100 and 10 kids along with chaperones to the Macy Day Parade, because I was a part of that parade. Wanted our young people to be able to see other communities that look just like ours, and how you can have a dream and you can travel wherever, but somehow find a way to come back home. So through my work at that time, I was just working with my church and through the schools and through the different organizations that I had been involved with as a youngster growing up. And it wasn't until 1996 that I was approached about still that I wanted to build a center. And we broke ground in 96 on the JJK Center. We opened in 2000. And at that time we do after school programs. We use sports as a hook to get them in the door, but it was really about exposure. And then right around, I think 2008, we hit a rough patch and we shut for like 6 months, but regrouped, redid the board and realized that we couldn't rely on just government funding. We went from 90% of grant funding and only 4% at individual giving. And today we changed that where it's 96% on individual giving and looking at how do we subsidize through some of the grant funding programs. So for me, probably right around that, I think it's 2012, me and my team wanted to address, food deserts. And what did that really mean? When you grow up in a community, not really having a grocery store, you only know what you know. But then also, how could we explore the idea of growing certain vegetables in the inner city? At this time, we had leased some land and planted, corn, field corn, radish, soybeans, and just to see what would grow in our inner city, and really having the buy-in from the community. It was a little rough at times, but then when we were explaining that most people see corn, they see the soybean. Yes, all that's good, but we see opportunity, and how can we get our young people to see opportunities in this field? And so that's what we were doing then, and the work that we were doing at the JJK Center involved, wellness, nutrition. I come from that, didn't realize how the two came together, outside of my athletic world, but I also understood that I had to know what I was putting in my body. And so as we transition and over at the JJK Center, we have a partnership with the Park District where we're running a greenhouse. And now our kids are planting seeds, learning where food comes from, that it just don't come out the can or it's just not in a bag, that dirt is okay, and but also working on other partnership with U of I and really trying to maybe have community gardens for the community, but just long-term ranges that allow us to not only have our young people be able to learn where food comes from, plant it, then take it into the next level of entrepreneurship. So there's a lot of things that when I talk about that exposure, that's part of that exposure. And that's what we're doing on the ag side of it. But we also, when COVID-19, we would do transportation. We pick our students up from school. They come to the center, they get their enrichment. We feed them because we learned over the years that when they would come into the center, they were very rowdy and you're trying to get them to do homework, and that just wasn't working because a lot of them, you get out of school at 2:30, 3:30, and that your last meal was at 11 o'clock. Just learning, more about our families and the students that we're working with. And hopefully we can continue to help them get on the path of through STEM, that they would find the excitement of it. There are so many levels and so many avenues, and that we just a small portion of that.
Well, as the son, husband, and father of teachers, I know well that a hungry kid can't learn. And that's what's so neat about what you've done is tie in activity, putting seeds in the ground, to nutrition and feeding folks. As a kid growing up on a cattle and sheep ranch and seeing kids that have been raised on farms and ranches, you learn so much through those experiences. So at your center, what does the work around urban farming. What does that teach the kids in your programs?
The work around urban farming, first of all, I want to say that the discipline and the hard work that goes into a farmer doing their work and bringing their family along and the connection. And so for us, we talk about the discipline, we talk about the work ethic, but more importantly, to be able to take them from the greenhouse, but then having an opportunity to go visit a farm so they can really put it all together makes a big difference, because you can read about it, but being able to experience different things from what they learned in when they were planting seeds, or maybe they might go to a county fair, but then being able to see it all, to me, encourage them in a way that they might not thought about agriculture. Myself being an ambassador with 4-H and the work that 4-H does, and some of the work that I would do with them through my Winning in Life program, that my goal and hopes is not only teaching them about hard work, but then also a career path of understanding that, I might not have been thinking this, but, and then having a relationship with U of I. So our goal is to do what we can within the community of East St. Louis, but then long term, to be able to grow, to have an endowment, to have a research center, to have a commercial kitchen that they could take what they grow, come back and make salads and cook and just see, wow, that this opened their minds and their world up to something that they didn't even know was possible. Because all you see around you is confectionaries or the discount stores, and not dismissing them at all, but what it's like to really go into a grocery store and be able to buy eggs or milk at a fair market value, because that grocery store is in your community, or you have decided through the work that you're doing, through your urban gardens and all the things that we're doing, that on the weekends, young people are having their market where people are coming and getting, and then they seeing themselves being entrepreneurs and being able to help feed a family and to understand and to appreciate, where food comes from.
That is so great, and I want you to know that if there's anything our organization can do to be a part of that, we would like to do that. You mentioned earlier that most of your revenue comes from individual donations, and I would imagine if I asked you, you might be able to tell us how we could make a donation online to the JJK Center.
Oh, yes. You can go to our website, jjkfoundation.org, and not only make a donation, but see what we're doing. And once we get out of this COVID-19, that I'd love for you to come and visit. And even if you want to visit, we could set it up and I'll be there.
I tell you what, I can guarantee you that we will be having a visit with you. I hope soon. Who knows how long it's going to be, but
I know.
I know I can get a group of farmers to come and visit, and then I'm sure many of them would like to have your folks come and visit their farms. Jackie, the current pandemic has highlighted some other challenges we also share across communities. Rural health facilities, were in bad shape long before this, and it's certainly been the case in some urban areas. How is the JJK Center helping your community deal with the pandemic?
We're very fortunate. One of the things that we're doing today is still delivering hot meals to our families. It's about over 200 families, but then also partnering with the National Guard for testing, and it's free. It's very important because it was impacting all of us, but there are indication where, they're impacting African Americans significantly. And then continuing to have our workers work, but then also social distancing. We're getting ready to start our summer camp from the standpoint of bringing in our students and making sure that they're 6 feet apart and that we have a 1-to-4 ratio in our different classrooms, because we sit on 36 acres and our building itself is over 60,000 square feet with Head Start in the back. And so just really trying to make sure that we could do our part, not only being able to provide a safe environment, but also continue to make sure that that education gap isn't spreading, because we have a reading specialist on hand. We try to make sure that all our young people can read at grade level, and we have our math and science teacher, but then they all are doing this under, I have a curriculum based off my autobiography called A Kind of Grace, called Winning in Life. And there's 14 different principles. And all these principles came out of how I evolved and grew up, and being able to have it evidence based. And our goal has always been to scale it, but we're slowly doing that because we see this as being a revenue source for the organization. And so these are the things that we're doing, and throughout all our programs, winning in life is a part of it, and people get stuck on the winning, but no, it's the winning with the right attitude, the right behavior and character and leadership, how crucial those things are.
Oh, thank you. Great, great words and a great message. Jackie, kids across the country have had to learn from home over the last few months, and broadband access has been a real problem in rural America. What is that access like for kids in urban areas right now?
It's unfortunate that broadband is not available to everyone, and I was very fortunate throughout the year to work with Comcast on bridging that digital divide, and how our young people in rural areas and inner cities, if they do not have access, then they are already behind, because even in today's time, a lot of the kids had to have access to the internet to even be able to finish their homework. And some of the schools were providing Wi-Fi and providing that for them, but it's been tough. So that's one of the access that we have at the JJK Center, is that we have our computer lab, but we have to be real careful because it's not set up for where we are today, the social distancing. So where we have, I think, 20 some computers in there, but we might have to pull some out and put them somewhere else so you can practice that social distancing. But I do think that the need in rural as well as inner city, having access is very important, because if they do not have access, they're already behind.
Amen. And that is one of the things that we've certainly learned in our organization is as we've tried to have meetings, the disparity across the board of who has good internet access and who does not. And it makes such a difference. Your ability to participate in whether it's a Zoom meeting or getting your lesson plan done. And I know my daughter is a teacher and teaching virtually and with two little girls who are learning virtually. And in that broadband access is so important for things to work well, and without that, kids that were behind before are going to get even more behind. We need to find ways to make the investment in infrastructure in this country. And a lot of times in our community, we think infrastructure is bridges, roads, locks, and dams. But infrastructure for all of us is also includes that broadband access and ability to communicate on so many levels. And the pandemic has just pointed out the need for it, and again the disparity.
Even when you think of the infrastructure and you talk about the broadband, and most of the time, if you go in the rural area or in some cases in there in the city, just having sidewalks, we think about health and wellness and paths to just walk where young people can feel safe, just different things that impact communities that a lot of people don't even think about. You live in poverty and you stay in that frame of mind, and so many other things that are so important, but just some of the basic needs that you don't even think about continue to hold a community or an area down.
Mhm. I know that you've mentioned that the STEM program at your center is so important, and we are working at the National Corn Growers Association on a STEM project. How are you helping those kids with the STEM program?
One of the great things about, we always talk about people say STEM, and then the basics for us, it starts with the reading, and making sure that they can read and they can understand, getting involved with the Lego projects, or some of our kids got involved with building up, they wanted a trophy case. So the construction side of it, which was great that they were able to put all these pieces together. And they even, like when we talk about, like when I talk to them about winning in life, getting them to understand the math and science that goes into me being a heptathlete. Even when we just talk about working on the 6 feet distancing, all this is a part of it, as well as our ag side of it and the arts. So we think that this summer should be very, very fun for them. But then we're allowing them to connect and to see, and hopefully they evolve and have fun with it, because everyone always do the robotics, which is great. You know, one of our goals too is that we just got a JJK team with esports. You know, trying to get our young people who love to write music, who love to do things that now they might be able to work on getting a certificate part of as they learning coding, all these things that we've been able to collaborate with different organizations to help us to bring this, to our students.
So one last thing, the COVID pandemic has kind of moved the 2020 Olympics to next year, the year after, whenever. But I promised my daughter and a couple other people I'd ask you about the Olympics. So what is your favorite Olympic memory or favorite Olympic memories?
Competing in 4 different Olympics, I would say that, yes, winning, of course, always sticks out. But my first Olympic Games, 84, and I was picked to win the gold medal. And my brother wasn't even picked to make the team, let alone, win. And so in 1984, we both made the Olympic team, and my brother went on and won the gold medal in the triple jump. And then, I struggled because I wasn't mentally tough. I was dealing with an injury, didn't know how to handle it. It's one thing to dream about going there, but I was ready mentally. I just wasn't ready. And so 84 sticks out because I left those Olympic Games saying that if God blessed me to make another Olympic team, I want to be the toughest athlete out there mentally. And so that, to me, prepared me to go on and win the double gold the next 4 years. But each one has taught me so much. In my last Olympic Games in 96, being able to, everyone that we all made the team together, how fortunate it was for us to be able to compete in 2 different Olympic Games on American soil. That doesn't happen, and I didn't realize the position that we were in to be able to finish my last Olympics game as my first one began in Los Angeles on American soil, the last one in Atlanta on American soil, winning a bronze medal when I wasn't able to finish the heptathlon. And I worked hard to try to see if I could pull off a win in the long jump. And that attitude got me a bronze medal. And that means the world to me, to know that, as I say to young people every day, never give up on yourself. Even when others count you out, you can turn a doubter into a believer as long as you believe. And that's what I said to myself. And winning that bronze medal was something special.
It's a remarkable career, and it sounds like you have a remarkable family as well, Ms. Joyner-Kersee. Your brother is an Olympian. As I understand it, he's married to an Olympian. You're married to an Olympic coach. And I picture what getting together at Christmas must be with so much athletic talent in your family. Do you guys ever, to this day, you're sitting around, you've just finished up Christmas dinner and look at each other and be like, 100-yard dash out in the street right now? Let's see who's got it.
You know what? That's how we used to do when I was younger. My brother would always challenge me to a foot race because he didn't believe in practicing. And so this one day, he was showing off in front of his friends, like, oh, she go to practice every day. And so we set up a foot race from the stop sign to the mailbox. And I outran him, and I looked back at him. I told him, see, this is what practice would do for you. He got the last laugh. He won the first gold medal in the family in the 84 games. And so, yes, we are very, very fortunate. My brother was married to the late Flo Jo, and my husband Bob Kersee coached all of us, as well as many more Olympic champions. And still today, with the Olympics being delayed, they were training, in Los Angeles. And Allison Felix is an athlete, someone I mentor. My husband is coaching her, and just hopefully they find a vaccine, or we find something that these athletes that have trained for so many years. And I don't want to trivialize the pandemic that we're dealing with. I mean, health and wellness is first and foremost. But I do know that so many athletes have trained, because the Olympics are every 4 years. And we know you have to be ready on those given days for your Olympic trials, and then when Olympic Games approach. But I'm just staying, hopeful, and that allow the doctors and the scientists to do what they need to do, so we as a nation, as well as the world, can come back and do the things that we love doing, conjugating and being able to shake hands and wish people well.
When I hear you say that, Jackie, it we have so much more in common than we think we do at first blush. And you have such a great story and a great commitment to your community. And whether you grow up in an urban area or a rural area, that sense of community, that sense of toughing things out, of moving forward despite adversity, it works well for all of us. And that's something that we all have in common. And so we just really appreciate all of the work that you've put in to your career, your athletic career, and in your career in helping your community and helping our community better understand the challenges and the opportunities that you have. And so thank you so much for being on the podcast. This has just been wonderful, and we can't thank you enough, and look forward to visiting the JJK Center soon.
Well, John, I just want to thank you, and I want to remind you, and also to your listeners, is that hopefully this is my first time, but it won't be my last time. I love to come back and be on your podcast, and thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. And as I was getting ready for the podcast this morning, I thought of my dad, and he always subscribed to Forbes magazine. And one of the quotes that Malcolm Forbes, the publisher of the magazine, had on the masthead of every copy of the Forbes magazine was, "With all thy getting, get understanding." So we thank our guest today, Jackie Joyner-Kersee, for helping us better understand a key component of our society and our this great nation. So that's all we have for this episode of Wherever John May Roam. I'm Jon Doggett. I'm the CEO of the National Corn Growers Association. And we'll talk to you again real soon on the next episode of the NCGA podcast.
Once again, if you're interested in learning more about the Jackie Joyner-Kersee Foundation or in supporting their mission, you can visit jjkfoundation.org. That is going to wrap up this edition of Wherever John May Roam, the National Corn Growers Association podcast. New episodes arrive monthly, so make sure you subscribe in your favorite podcast app and join us again soon. Visit ncga.com to learn more or sign up for the association's email newsletter. Wherever John May Roam is brought to you by the National Corn Growers Association and produced by PodCamp Media, branded podcast production for businesses, podcampmedia.com. For the National Corn Growers Association, thanks for listening. I'm Dusty Weiss.